Welcome, Leo, to your in-depth monthly forecast for November 2023 for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to give you some standout details to look out for. Please stay with me. I will explore in much greater depth all the ins and outs, particularly relevant to your sign. Now, because your ruler is the Sun, lunations are critically important. The first, on the 13th, is a new moon, but this is a new moon that combines with the feisty energies of Mars, and it's in your home sector where you live, your emotions, and anything to do with your family environment. So very potent on the 13th. The full moon, which occurs on the 27th, is in the potentially social sign of Gemini for you. But that too is going to be in opposition with Mars as well as the moon, but squared up by the tricky energies of Saturn. But there's lots more to share with you, so please stay with me for more. With year 2024 speeding towards us, if you order your year 2024 personal horoscope forecast now, I'll prepare the rest of year 2023 for you, free of charge. But also in my special package of 30% off, I'll prepare for you your character analysis report, your life roadmap. This will give you searing insights to understand the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but helping you to get a much more intimate understanding of how to work with these in a really adroit way. Please see the link beneath this video for more information. So Leo, as you come into November, the Sun, Mercury and Mars are all in Scorpio. The Sun in the sign of Scorpio can be a little bit protective, especially for your sign, because this is house 4. It's watery. It can be to do with your environment and also to do with your feelings. And because Mercury is in this location as well, there can be a tendency with Mercury in the 4th house to bottle things up a little bit. And Mercury is in an opposition with Uranus in the first week of November. If there is something that's bugging you in terms of your work situation, you could find yourself being a little bit more reactive. But there's another opposition that goes between the signs of Taurus, where Uranus is, and that's Jupiter going back towards the Sun. And this actually can be really fortunate. Now, we know the housing market, whether it's for rentals or purchases, is being squeezed the world over. There's a lack of availability, rentals have gone up, interest rates are higher. But it could be that you can find a way through by sheer willpower, but also your sense of confidence and conviction that what your plan is workable. And that's because the Sun opposite Jupiter, although it creates a polarity, this can actually be a very positive influence as long as we don't expect too much from it. There can be that tendency with Jupiter to just sit on our hands and believe that Jupiter will provide all of our expectations fully met. But Jupiter, of course, is in a retrograde, and in the sign of Taurus tends to be a bit slower, but in a way more real. But whether it's around a professional situation that perhaps would give you more income to then go for a home situation that's better for you, or it is something to do with modifying where you're living now, or some other issue to do with your professional world and your family world, there is a kind of tension at the start of this month, but I must stress there are some opportunities. But also across week 1, Venus, which is in an opposition with Neptune, is asking you to be very realistic around a romantic situation that maybe where you're pulled towards someone is very beguiling, but you can't quite figure out what they're about. It's also possible that someone could try to interest you in a product that could be a beauty product with Venus in the mix, and maybe it does have some benefits, but I would proceed with a little bit of caution. If you do encounter someone for the first time, there is the potential to be really mesmerized by this person, but Neptune can create something of a deception if we're not careful, so just be conscious of that. Now, on the 4th, Saturn does end a retrograde, which began mid-June, But if you recall, Saturn moved into Pisces on the 7th of March. Have you noticed any change to your cash flow or earning power or your general long-term financial situation since then? Of course, we're all dealing with this increase of cost, so it seems like a pretty generalised thing. But if you have felt things tightening up a bit more than you expected, it may be because of Saturn moving there, because it's gone through a series of oppositions with planets in your second house of everyday finance. And of course, that's going on at the start of this month with Venus and Neptune too. So Saturn going direct on the 4th, I think is something you're going to really appreciate. If you've been waiting for some funds to come through, a debt to be repaid, you're looking to recapitalise or squeeze a bit more from the resources you've got, Saturn going direct will definitely help that. But on the 8th, Venus moves into the sign of Libra, which it governs along with the sign of Taurus. But for you, Venus moving into Libra is going to give you an ability to articulate yourself with a great deal of added charm. Now, you're a sign with absolute oodles of ability to get people to think well of you. You know, you have tremendous charisma at the best of times, but don't underestimate your ability to convey your ideas. So if you do lack a little bit of confidence in yourself at times, Venus is going to help you through to the end of this month. So whether it's writing an application, sending a cheeky text message to someone you're drawn to, or perhaps around just general conversation, you may find that someone can be quite smitten by your just way of saying things as much as what you're actually saying. Now, ironically, the planet which governs communication, Mercury, moves into your sister sign of Sagittarius on the 10th. And because Mercury has been, along with the Sun and Mars, in the 4th house, just being really honest, Mercury in the 4th house can see us worrying a lot and finding it hard to actually output some of the concerns we have. So what happens is repetitive thoughts can go around our mind and we can't quite sort of make sense of them. And the reason for this is that although Mercury itself in Scorpio can be very useful to analyse what's going on underneath the surface, because it's the 4th house for you, that's watery, and Mercury works best when it's working with logic, which comes from both of its rulerships of Gemini and Virgo, and precision. So moving into your 5th house is a very playful area, and that gives you a little bit of an inkling of where this month is developing. So it starts off with a big focus on the emotional, home and environmental part of your existence, but with Mercury moving, despite it being technically detrimented in Sagittarius, this is a part of your chart for you where your sense of humour can click back on. It is challenged almost immediately by Saturn. If, for example, you have really been very disciplined with money, you could find yourself tempted to be a little bit more extravagant across the next 2 or 3 days, or decide to meet up with someone and be a bit more free and easy with your resources. But sometimes we do need to do these things in order to survive when it is much tougher. But on the 13th, the new moon does see the Sun, the Moon and Mars all close together. Mars very close to the new moon. And Mars close to the moon in the 4th house does have some challenges, even though it's a new moon. And the reason for this is that Mars, as I mentioned, in the 4th house, it has a sense of Mars in Cancer, which is in its full. It can be a bit prickly, can be a bit impatient, can be defensive. If we're feeling grumpy and off colour and we're snappy, that's a kind of Mars, especially with family members or the people we live with. It's very much a kind of Mars in 4th house energy. So it's a new moon, and the energy of Mars can give you so much drive to change something that you're not satisfied with. So for example, if you have a decorative scheme you really don't like, you're going to find the necessary energy to change it. Or some furnishings that you've never really bonded with, or perhaps you feel cluttered in your space. Moving furnishings around is almost inevitable for you over the following month. But for some Leos, it could also mean that you are going to be much more outspoken around some sensitive strands. And whereas I feel since Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008, I think you've put yourself, I wouldn't say second, but you have a reputation of being, a dazzling player, but you have taken your responsibilities awesomely serious since then. And it may have been that you've at times put your needs to one side. And if it's felt that other people haven't been contributing as much as they might, and you don't feel very respected, you may find yourself really powerfully outspoken. Now, because you have Venus in your third house, it's possible that you could use the still fist of Mars in the fourth house inside the velvet glove of Venus in the third. So even though you might be mightily irritated, you could still get your point across in a diplomatic way. But don't be surprised if you do find yourself a bit grumpy, but up and down from this new moon onwards. But it is going to give you a push to say how you feel, which has proved rather elusive with Mercury in your fourth house, where maybe some ideas or thoughts have been going around your mind, but you're not actually been ventilating them. So a very powerful new moon indeed. But from the 18th to the 22nd, the Sun in that fourth house does link very well to Pluto, the aforementioned. And if there is something you want to change around where you live, or assert your authority with family members, perhaps wanting them to take on more responsibilities and obligations, get things working a bit more in an ordered way. If you work from home, have a more clear distinction between your workstation and the washing in the corner. And your drive to achieve that, to make some kind of fundamental shift in your home environment, can be very strong. Well, that takes us to the 22nd and the 24th, because this is when your month really starts to cook on gas, but in a very different way, because the Sun moves into your sister fire sign of Sagittarius, followed by Mars. So Mars continues to follow the Sun. But this last quarter of the month gives you the potential to be much more outgoing, much more playful, much more sociable. But Saturn immediately tries to block the more joyful energy of the Sun and Mars moving into house 5, which is very redolent of your core energy, which can be great fun, really affectionate, warm, wanting to socialise and mix and mingle. So if financial matters are still a little bit of a concern, you may in some ways have to cramp your style a little bit later in the month. Also Mercury then from the 25th to the 30th squares with Neptune, like Saturn in your 8th house. If there is something that you're thinking of buying, or you're thinking of having a punt on, you see these schemes, don't you? Earn say $1,000 a month by working just 10 hours a month, this kind of stuff. They're always popping up on things like Facebook, and it's possible that there could be some legitimacy to some of them, but the problem with these kind of schemes is they often require an awful lot of focus and dedication, and it isn't always as easy as it sounds to do something on the side. What's the new term for it? A side hustle. It just fascinates me the way these terms come in and suddenly everyone uses the same phrase. But if there is something that you're attracted to having a little bit of a flutter on, I really would make sure, with Neptune applying to Mercury and Saturn to the Sun and Mars, that you're not risking any resources that you can't afford to lose. So be very, very risk averse, I would say, because the 5th house, particularly with Mars in the mix, can push you to really want to be more speculative. So Saturn, in a way, along, not so much Neptune, because that can confuse and can distort, and you could encounter someone who's actually downright dishonest, but certainly Saturn could protect you in a way, because it can try to apply a brake to a more extravagant or risk-taking side of your nature. If you're someone, for example, who does like to be a little bit edgy when it comes to your love life, just be aware that a complication could come up through getting together with someone intimately. It might, you could get caught up in the passion of the moment, entirely possible, particularly with the Gemini full moon on the 27th, because that is in the 11th house, friendships, your social world, your network, whereas the Sun and Mars are in the part of your situation. It's to do with what you get from that. All sounds hunky-dory, except that Saturn is T-square in both positions. So just be aware that whether it's friendships, what you desire for yourself, your love life, there could be some kind of snag that can come through towards the end of this month. Now, that's not to say the combination between the Sun and Mars in Sagittarius isn't exciting, because it truly is. It just means, for example, say you go on a date with someone and you really like them. You find them great fun, breath of fresh air. It could be that somebody close to you is really put out by that. Maybe there could be some jealousy or possessiveness that's behind their attitude, but equally it could be because they are actually genuinely concerned about you, that you're just saying, oh no, I'll be absolutely fine, don't fuss. You're living in the moment. So living in the moment is very much part of the dimension, the dynamic that comes to the fore at the end of this month. And you may bitterly resist anyone that you feel is trying to be the voice of reason. It's almost like the bank manager syndrome. But what would happen if this business doesn't work out? Oh, but it won't. It will definitely work out. So sometimes we do get challenged by, that voice on our shoulder we don't really want to hear. But if you do hear an inner voice saying, look, this doesn't quite stack up, this thing that you read about to make money quickly, or there could be someone you're drawn to, seems very alluring, and then you find out Saturn in the 8th, they're actually already in a relationship that's actually really quite committed, and they're just looking for a fling, and you might be looking for something much more sincere. So it's not to say there aren't opportunities, but just be aware of where your lust and passion takes you at the end of this month. But certainly at the heart of this month, there is a lot of push to make some changes to where you live or within your relationships to people you're particularly emotionally close to.